Hi, I'm Carlos Velazquez. I'm here for the Garner Senior Center to share with you today a subject which very few people have discussed because it's not something we normally hear about or have thought about. For many, many, many years here in the United States, especially, we've known about a little bit about the history of the indigenous that lived here, the ones that have spread all over, the ones that have grown crops, have taught us about different foods. We have learned, not enough, but hopefully soon we will be learning more about the indigenous that occupied the United States. But there are other indigenous. There are indigenous in the Inuit. The Inuit are called the peoples. We have the first peoples of Canada, which again are indigenous. We have the United States, and then we have south of the border. One of the areas which many people don't realize has been occupied by indigenous, what we call Indians today, but they are the indigenous. And these are nations that we should learn about. And today I would like to share something with you, something rather unique. And hopefully this will grow into somebody going out and checking up on their backgrounds. Someone going to a library and finding books, pictures, going on the web where you can find out the different nations that you were from. And this is what we would like to start a little thought going on today. And today I have labeled it the Indians south of the U.S. border. Oh. As you see here, this is Central America. And Central America starts way down here in Colombia, runs through Panama. You see Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and then there's Mexico and Belize. Belize used to be called British area, but it's not. So now it's just Belize. But all these make up Central America, and of course up in Mexico, and below here, South America. In these areas, Central America is relatively small. We don't think of it as being very big. In fact, it's only like 201 square miles, whereas Mexico covers 573. It's a very large country making up Central America. The U.S. covers 1.79 million, which is more than 3 times what the other two are combined. In that small area, you see there are over 262 indigenous Indian tribes in Central America and Mexico combined. That's quite a few, but that's really not the number because there's very small nations, tribes that have splintered off, and because of their languages, they are different than even though they have the same name. You have in the United States, when the Europeans first came here, there were over 1,020 indigenous Indian tribes before 1492. That's when the Europeans first came. Of course, they landed in Hispania, and they started working with the Carib Indians, the Tiani Indians, many different Indian nations throughout the islands. And now, because of them being moved, many of them dying from different diseases, smallpox and so forth, which were brought by the Europeans, which they didn't have immunities to, they are down to only a few hundred nations. And of course, in the United States, because of the taking of their land and being put on reservations, if you really start to look at how many federally recognized indigenous, which are indigenous nations which are supported or recognized by the U.S., It's only really like 347. Some of the paperwork you'll see says over 500, but this is not true. This is all that you have. I wanted to speak about one of the nations that I know about out of all those in Central America, and that is the Otomi. I am Otomi Nation. I'm very proud of it. And what you see here next to me here is the headdress of an elder, an Otomi elder. On the front, you can see it has some birds. It has a beautiful design. This is all handmade by Otomi. Now, where are they located? This is anywhere from up here, which is New Mexico and Arizona. You have the mountain range, Sierra Madre Mountains that run through here. And then you have the Otomi. But as you noticed, they say there's the Otomi of Querétaro, the Highland Otomi. These are all different areas that they lived. So when we say where are they from, they're from all over central Mexico and northern Arizona and New Mexico. There are pictures that I have been very fortunate to find and to save of some of the Otomi. You see some of the maguey, some of the cactuses that they lived in. You see some of the figures that they carved out. Here is some ancient pictures of them dancing. And here are some elders that are doing ceremonies. They're still doing ceremonies in different parts of central Mexico. And there have been different organizations that have tried to organize the Native Americans or the indigenous. People always forget that they are from one area of North America to the other. There was back in the 1990s a walk of peace, of unity, which started from Alaska going north. They followed the coast. And then there was another group of indigenous that started from Argentina, and they started to go north. And their goal was to meet in Mexico City at Tijuana pyramids and have ceremonies there. And it was so interesting because by the time they got to Mexico City, which was months of walking, they were assisted along the way by different indigenous as far as food and lodging, and a lot of their clothes, the shoes, because the temperatures were changing. It turned out to be one of the most unifying things where the indigenous themselves showed up in Mexico City, and they had dancing, they had prayers, and that's what you see here. Oh, let me go back. Oh. That's what you see here. You see them in the regalia, and you see this one elder who was wearing a headdress of the Otomi. The Otomi, oh, there we go. The Otomi speak a language called Nuanua, which is part of a group of languages that many of the indigenous, even down into South America, speak. It's called the Uto Maricuan language. And it covers quite a bit of area, but it has dialects, just here as we have here in the United States. You can tell when people from different parts of the U.S. Are speaking, they have different dialects. The language is still the same, but the dialect makes it a little different. In this particular picture, this happens to be a picture of my grandmother. Not a very large woman, very small in stature. These are 4 of her sons, and this happens to be my father. And this gentleman right here, what's interesting thing about him is he has part of his ears cut off. The reason is he fought on the side of Pancho Villa in the revolution, And when the soldiers, the army of Mexico, caught the revolutionaries, rather than killing them and making them heroes, they cut off their ears, so they were labeled wherever they went. So basically, in the family, he's a hero because he did fight, and when he came back, he was part of helping Mexico to become a more native-driven area. The Juarez, one of the first presidents of Mexico, was a very dark-skinned gentleman, but he was an Indian. He wasn't a Mexican, Spanish, or anything else. He was an Indian, and this made him very special, and the people not only appreciated him, they adored him. Again, my grandmother was a very hard-headed woman, and she refused to speak Spanish. She said to her sons, her husband if he wanted to, but she refused to speak Spanish. To the day she passed, she was speaking Nuanwa. My grandfather never spoke English. Most of his sons learned to speak English primarily because of the money, because of dealing with Americans that were coming down in those areas for the cactus, for the bananas, for all different rubbers. So they learned how to speak the language, English. And of course, once they learned, they realized that there was more money up north than there was in central Mexico. So many of them moved to the United States. This area here in yellow is called Berlingia. Many people are not familiar with Berlingia. It's a land that existed hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago. Before the earth broke apart in different areas, and you've seen where Africa broke away from South America, all the continents were formed at that time. This area existed. And in that area is where the indigenous came from. When it started to break up, they started to move south. And because of that, they were a very basic group of people. They were a race of their own. Just recently, I don't know how many of you have Ancestry, but Ancestry has changed their designations because of this people that lived there. And because when they were investigated, as far as the DNAs, they were found that they had no other connection with Asia, with Africa, with Europe. They were a race of themselves. So now when you get Ancestry and they are identifying you, they started out by claiming that we are indigenous Americans. And then they put what areas you're from. But the basics is we are all indigenous Americans, from the Inuit to the base of South America. We have what you would call Indians or indigenous. You have the first people of Canada. They are no different than the people here in the United States. No different than the people South Mexico, Central America, and South America. We are all one people, and it has been proven by the DNAs that we are one. And it's always interesting that, again, I emphasize to many of you students, many of you people who are investigating your backgrounds, because there's so many moving into the United States, they leave their heritage behind. We cannot leave our heritage behind. This is part of our heritage, the beauty, the wonder, the art. The languages are disappearing, but we can keep the art alive. We can keep the dancing alive. We can keep our relationships with other indigenous alive. And this is something we can't lose. But again, this area here, very few people know of it, but yet it is responsible for the DNA and the structure of the indigenous. I would like to thank you I would like to again emphasize the education of all of us and the indigenous, not only the ones here in the United States that have disappeared through many reasons. Up north, the Canadians are making restitution and working with many of the natives to give them an opportunity to exist. The Inuit, which are just starting to come off the ice in the last less than hundreds of years, trying to keep what wonderful cultures they have, what little art they actually have can be preserved. And the same thing going into Central America and South America. These are very important to us. We should not stay local. We should understand what the people of the world are like that we belong to. And again, the only thing that separates the indigenous are the lines that are on maps. There's nothing physical there. There never has been. And these lines are nothing more than scales between countries, between states, and we have to go beyond that. Again, I'd like to thank you so very much. Have a nice day.